The Communist Insurgency War, also known as the Second Malayan Emergency, occurred in Malaysia from 1968 to 1989, involving the Malayan Communist Party and Malaysian government security forces. Following the end of the Malayan Emergency in 1960, the predominantly ethnic Chinese Malayan National Liberation Army, the armed wing of the MCP, had retreated to the Malaysian-Thailand border where it had regrouped and retrained for future offensives against the Malaysian government. The Communist Insurgency War officially began when the MCP ambushed security forces in Kroh Betong, in the northern part of Peninsular Malaysia, on 17 June 1968. The conflict also coincided with renewed tensions between ethnic Malays and Chinese in Peninsular Malaysia and the Vietnam War. While the Malayan Communist Party received some limited support from China, this support ended when Kuala Lumpur and Beijing established diplomatic relations in June 1974. In 1970, the MCPU experienced a schism which led to the emergence of two breakaway factions: the Communist Party of Malaya Marxist-Leninist and the Revolutionary Faction. Despite efforts to make the MCP appeal to Malays, the organization was predominantly dominated by ethnic Chinese throughout the duration of the Communist Insurgency War. Instead of declaring state of emergency, as the British had done previously, the Malaysian government responded to the insurgency by introducing several policy initiatives including the Security and Development Program, Rukun Tetangga, and the Rela Corps. The Communist Insurgency War came to an end on 2 December 1989 when the MCP signed a peace accord with the Malaysian government at Hat Yai in southern Thailand. This coincided with the collapse of the Eastern Bloc communist regimes. Besides the Communist Insurgency War, another communist insurgency also occurred in the Malaysian state of Sarawak in the island of Borneo, which had been incorporated into the Federation of Malaysia on 16 September 1963. Background: during the First Malayan Emergency, the MCP launched an unsuccessful insurrection against the Federation of Malaya. The independence of the Federation of Malaya on 31 August 1957 removed the major cause for the Communists as the Federation has been liberated from the British. The First Malayan Emergency was revoked on 31 July 1960. During the lull period of 1960 to 1968, the MCP underwent a period of streamlining, retraining, and re-indoctrination of the communism ideology. The Malayan Races Liberation Army had established a series of bases along the Malaysian southern Thailand border. Despite being weakened by the Commonwealth forces during the first emergency, the MCP had also reorganized its units and reconstituted itself by training new guerrilla fighters. They also developed new techniques of guerrilla warfare after observing the Vietnam War. The MCP also made efforts to recruit more Malays into their organization. Despite a small number of Malay personnel, including Abdullah Sidi and Rashid Maida, it remained dominated by the Chinese. A special Malay unit, known as the 10th Regiment, was established under the leadership of a Central Committee member, Abdullah Sidi. Abdullah also established several masses revolutionary school to disseminate Maoist ideas among Thai Malays. Since the MCP was based in southern Thailand, most of its recruits were Thai Malays and people from Kelantan, a northeastern Malaysian state. To enhance the appeal of the MCP among the Malays, the Islamic Brotherhood Party was set up as the front organization of the MCP. PAPERI was responsible for distributing leaflets claiming that there was no incompatibility between Islam and communism. In July 1961, Chin Peng met Deng Xiaoping in China. Deng had proposed to the MCP that it conduct a second armed struggle. Deng insisted that Malaya was ripe for a revolution. The success of Vietnam War bolstered the MCP to launch another revolt in Malaya. Deng later promised Jinping that China would assist the MCP and contribute $100,000 for the second insurgency in Malaya. Early offensive. On 1 June 1968, the Central Command of the MCP issued a directive entitled, "Hold high the Great Red Banner of Armed Struggle and Valiantly March Forward." The MCP was ready to start a new insurgency in Malaysia. On 17 June 1968, to mark the 20th anniversary of their armed struggle against the Malaysian government, the MCP launched an ambush against security forces in the area of Kroh Betong in the northern part of Peninsular Malaysia. They achieved a major success, killing 17 members of the security forces. This event marked the start of the second armed revolt of the MCP. At the initial stage of their second insurgency, the MCPU achieved a significant amount of success. Their actions at this stage were bolder and more aggressive, causing considerable losses to the security forces. These successes were due to their preparation and the training that they received during the lull periods, or the reconsolidation period after the end of the first insurgency. According to Jinping, the MCP's ranks had grown to around 1,000 by the period between 1967–68. Following the race riots of the May 13 incident, underground communist activists operating in the towns and rural areas launched a word-of-mouth campaign which targeted ethnic Chinese youths who were disaffected with the alliance government's pro-Malay affirmative action policies, particularly the new economic policy. By that stage, MNLA numbers had swelled to 1,600, with approximately half of these originating from Peninsular Malaysia and the rest from southern Thailand. While acknowledging the presence of strong racial tensions in Malaysian society, National University of Singapore history professor Chi Boon Keng has contended that the communist insurgency did not evolve into a racial conflict. Due to the government and public's preoccupation with the insurgency, they had learned from the past that they could no longer rely on sympathizers from the poor or village people for their food and logistics. To support the MCP's renewed insurgency, a clandestine radio station known as Suara Revolution Rakyat was established in 1969 to cater to communist cadre throughout Peninsular Malaysia and Singapore. Suara Revolution was based in Hunan since the People's Republic of China under Mao Zedong was still covertly supporting Maoist guerrilla movements in Southeast Asia, including the MCP. The radio station broadcast Maoist propaganda which supported Communist China and the MCP. Suara's programs were beamed across the region by a powerful 20-kilowatt transmitter, and it was broadcast in 3 languages: Chinese, Malay, and Tamil. Later, English broadcasts were also added after the MCP succeeded in recruiting several university students from both Singapore and Malaysia, while the Malaysian Special Branch and the Singaporean Internal Security Department regarded the students as communists. Jinping and other MCP leaders believed that most of these student recruits were merely left-wing sympathizers. In 1969, the Malaysian government responded to the communist resurgence by establishing its own special forces, VAT 69, which was modelled after the British Special Air Service. Most of the recruits came from the Malaysian Police Field Force. The unit was trained by Anshash Training Detachment in Ipoh in 1969. By 1972, the British had succeeded in training a full squadron of 104 men. Following the departure of the British SHASH team, a training detachment from the New Zealand Special Air Service took over the training program and trained another 208 men. The NZSAS also handpicked and trained 13 VAT 69 soldiers to serve as a VAT 69 training cell, which went on to train a 4th squadron. According to a Central Intelligence Agency report published in April 1976, China limited its involvement in the Communist Insurgency War to radio broadcasts from Suara Revolution. Beijing did not become materially involved in this conflict and would later establish diplomatic relations with Kuala Lumpur in June 1974. The Soviet Union and Democratic Republic of Vietnam also did not become involved in the Malaysian insurgency (MCP) internal conflicts. In early 1970, the MCPU experienced a major crisis within the party. Internal disputes due to the counterintelligence problems posed by the special branch had caused severe conflicts among the MCP members. During this period, it was reported that the government agents and spies had succeeded in infiltrating the MCP organization. It was reported that the spies were plotting a coup within the MCP headquarters. According to Chin Peng, the counterintelligence investigators appointed by the MCP Central Committee reported that they believed that 90% of the Thai Chinese recruits who joined the party from 1960 onward were government spies. Members in the militant wing started to accuse each other as government spies. Betrayal in guerrilla ranks was regarded as the most serious crime against the party, and the punishment was normally death by execution. During the jungle trial held by the MCP leadership, a large number of guerrillas from headquarters and Betamese camp were found guilty of being enemy agents. However, the Sadao and the West Betome group refused to conduct such trials. Instead, they refused to adhere to the MCP Central Committee orders. They in fact made an accusation that the MCP Central Committee was under the control of government agents. In 1970, the leadership struggle within the MCP led to the emergence of two breakaway factions: the Communist Party of Malaya Marxist-Leninist and the Revolutionary Faction. This caused the communist movement in Peninsular Malaysia to splinter into three different groups. Each of these factions had their own armed forces and front organization. The MRLA in the northern part of Malaysia near the Thailand border were located in three places. The MCP Central Committee was with the East Betome group, and the other two groups were located at West Betome and Sadao. When the crisis was getting worse, the Sadao groups broke away from the main MCP groups and proclaimed themselves as the MCP Revolutionary Faction. Subsequently, the Betome West group, who also broke from the main MCP groups, identified their party as the MCP Marxist-Leninist, and later renamed their guerrilla arm as the Malayan People's Liberation Army instead of the Malayan Races Liberation Army. In 1973, the CPM implemented a new strategy calling for their military activities to be coordinated with those of front organizations. Later in January 1975, the CPM also issued a second directive calling for 1975 to be a New Year combat. These directives led to increased CPM operations in Malaysia between 1974 and 1975, though it did not reach emergency-era levels. According to a Central Intelligence Agency National Intelligence estimate in April 1976, the CPM's increased activities were meant to demonstrate to the Malaysian government and public that it was still committed to continuing its revolutionary struggle despite the establishment of diplomatic ties between Malaysia and the People's Republic of China in June 1974. Some observers believed that this new revolutionary struggle was initiated with the influence of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. They believed that the Vietnam Communist Party, backed by the Soviet Union, had agreed to provide logistical and propaganda support to the new faction groups, such as Betome West and Sadao Group. Later it was found out that the Betome West and the Sadao Group ceased to exist not long after they broke away from the main groups. These groups realized that their armed struggles could not achieve any success. The West Betong and the Sadao groups then decided to surrender themselves to the Thai government in early 1987. After that time, the MCP arms struggles and militant activities became weak and disintegrated with no clear political or military objective. By April 1976, Malaysian government sources and the CIA estimated that there were at least 2,400 communist insurgents in Peninsular Malaysia, 1,700 members in the original MCP, 300 in the CPMRF, and 400 in the CPMML. Despite efforts by the MCP to recruit more Malay members, it was estimated in 1976 that less than 5% of the organization's members were ethnic Malays originating in Malaysia. Meanwhile, it was estimated that 69% of the MCP's members were ethnic Chinese and that 57% of the organization's members were Thai nationals, which also included both ethnic Chinese and Malays. The Security and Development Program. From the Briggs Plan, the Malaysian government understood the importance of security and development and how it could be used against the MCP insurgency. The Malaysian government, then, introduced a new strategy of fighting the MCP. It was known as Security and Development Program, or KESBAN, the local acronym, and focused on civil-military affairs. KESBAN constituted the sum total of all measures undertaken by the Malaysian Armed Forces and other agencies to strengthen and protect society from subversion, lawlessness, and insurgency which effectively broke the resistance. Undoubtedly, the Malaysian authorities found that security and development were the most prudent approaches to combating the communist insurgency and terrorism. The KESBAN programs succeeded in developing Malaysia into a more stable and secure society. Malaysia basically had institutionalized the concept of KESBAN, with the establishment of coordinated bodies from the village, district, and state to the federal levels. All the relevant agencies were represented, and this enabled problems to be discussed and resolved through joint conciliation. The government made large efforts to develop rural areas with the implementation of massive development programs such as building roads, schools, hospitals, medical clinics, and public utilities like electricity and water supply. Major projects under KESBAN program were East-West Highway, Temangor Dam, PDU Dam and Muda Dam. The government also instituted other security measures to meet the MCP menace, including strict press censorship, increasing the size of the police force, resettling squatters and relocating villagers in insecure rural areas. By mid-1975, when the MCP militant activities were at a peak, the government promulgated a set of essential regulations, without declaring a state of emergency. The essential regulations provided for the establishment of a scheme called the Rukun Tetangga Rela. The concept of Rukun Tetangga had made the Malays, Chinese, and Indians become closer together, and more tolerant of each other. The Malaysian government made the right decision by not declaring a state of emergency during the second insurgency. The reason was a desire to avoid aggravating the fears of the populace and to avoid scaring away needed foreign investment. The economic prosperity achieved in the 1970s enabled the administration of Tun Abdul Razak and later Tun Hussein who took over on the death of Tun Razak in 1976, to make considerable progress towards the Malaysian economy. When Dr. Mahathir Mohamad took over as the Malaysian Prime Minister from Dato' Hussein in 1980, he succeeded in making Malaysia one of the fastest developing nations in Asia. The annual growth of the Malaysian economy rose up to 8%. The MNLA also tried to win the support of the Orange ASLI, a group of Aboriginal peoples native to Peninsular Malaysia. They consisted of three main groups: the Jahai, the Temir, and the Senwaran lived in the remote jungle interior of the peninsula. During the Malayan emergency, both the Malayan government and the MNLA had competed for the support and loyalty of the Orange ASLI communities. Orange ASLI were used by both sides as guides, medical orderlies, couriers, and to grow agricultural crops. The Malayan government made efforts to win the support of the Orange ASLI by establishing an Orange ASLI Affairs Department and the Senwar Praak Regiment for hunting communist forces. Meanwhile, the MNLA also formed ASL groups to serve as couriers and to cultivate agricultural crops. Following the end of the emergency in 1960, the Orange ASLI had been neglected, and this made them reluctant to support the Malaysian government during the 1970s. In September 1974, the Senwar Praak Regiment was absorbed into the Royal Malaysian Police and was based in Kroh, Perak. Due to its success against MNLA forces, another Senwar Praak battalion was formed in Bidor, Perak.